I'm Ashton Addison from EventChain for Investment Pitch Media and FinTech News Network. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Jim Dolbear, the president of Elixir and the XX Network. Jim, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks, Ashton.
You're very welcome. Let's kick off the interview by learning a little bit more about the purpose and the vision of Elixir and the XX Network. First of all, how did it start and what were the problems that you were looking to solve when you started the project?
Well, it all started in the late 70s or early 80s. I mean, David Shum, who's the CEO of our organization, really identified with some other people that the digital network, as it would be adopted, over the ensuing decades, that there would be problems that are with privacy and problems with using the network for people to live their sort of normal lives. And I think he was like, maybe 20, 30 years ahead of his time. So what we have done is to address the problems that he identified, in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I read David Shum's background, and he helped with digicash and cryptography way before blockchains had existed in this modern time. So I guess some of those concepts are now able to become realized now that we have more of the distributed ledger network.
No, it's a good point. So he invented some cryptographic, some math, which was unprecedented, but it involved large numbers. So the things that he's famous for, blind signatures, which we use, and mixed networks, which underpin all the privacy protecting characteristics of Elixir and are part of Tor. All of that, was he published in the 80s, but the network and the processing power of computers generally wasn't sort of up to it in terms of processing the crypto. Crypto involves large numbers. So really what happened was we had to wait a little bit into the mid-90s to see some of the things that he had invented really, come to fruition. And that included digicash, the original digital currency, which he invented using double-blind signatures from the early 80s.
Very interesting. So there's the Elixir, which I believe is the communications layer, and then there's the XX network, which is like the blockchain protocol itself. Maybe you could elaborate on what exactly is Elixir and how does it fit into the XX network?
Yeah. So David, I think correctly, had identified privacy or confidentiality or the ability to participate in freely as a citizen in democracy as sort of the ultimate challenge. Sometimes people talk about the United States as kind of the grand experiment, and people forget that democracy has not been like hugely successful, the broad sweep of history. And check your history books, right? And so David, I think, really realized like this is critically important, and we need to look at how computers and digital networks, how they will impact democracy. So what he realized, and I think if you check, there's some archiving online. In 1994, at CERN, he gave the keynote address, the first World Wide Web conference. And basically what he said is, this network is going to be huge. People are going to want to be present on the network, and they're going to share information. They're going to want to support political causes. They're going to want to buy things. What's going to be critically important is to have currency to drive the ecosystem of the network. And Tim Berners-Lee, who was the second speaker, said it's going to be like Alexandria, but on steroids, the biggest library in the history of the world. And people will get smarter. Diseases will be addressed. Information sharing will be unprecedented. It's going to change the world. And kind of both of them were right. What happened at first is what Tim Berners-Lee said. There was an enormous amount of information on the network that had never been available before, and people were, accessing libraries from around the world. But then what happened, over months and years is what David had kind of warned against in the mid 80s. And he famously said in 84, 85, you have this digital network, and the way the network is defined, which is all of the addressing is public. What's going to happen is that you're going to have a big advertising driven, marketing driven corporation, and they're going to aggregate this information, and they're going to control who sees what, and they're going to monetize the network. And he really said that. It's amazing. He said that in 84, 85, and
Wow.
you have Facebook and Google. That's what happened.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And the XX network's been out for a little bit. I believe it is in its public alpha stage right now. How long has the project, taken to get to this stage?
Good question. So basically, so you can see from what I've been talking about so far, we started with privacy. And the first implementation of the Elixir CMIC solution came out of an academic consortium. And it was in 2014, 2015, 2016. So we actually had a software client that ran on a smartphone, and it was done between some US universities and European universities. And we created a commercial entity in 2007, almost 3 years ago, and started commercial software development around bringing this, what we call, it's an accelerated mix, and I can explain a little bit how that works, to bring this privacy layer to the blockchain, because nothing like that had ever existed. And so that's how it all started. And then as a second step, we said, if we want to make this privacy, make Elixir work, the Elixir project work, we're going to have a sister project, a consensus protocol, which addresses the protection of privacy and the selection of nodes to run the CMIC software, which hides the metadata for senders and receivers of messages, information, and exchange of value. We're going to have to develop a consensus protocol to make that work. So we started in stealth, and then we moved a team to the Cayman Islands because we had visa issues, really. We had a bunch of very bright Portuguese cryptographers. And so Praxxis, which is the sister project, is on the face of it a traditional consensus protocol. It provides for a quantum secure digital currency, but also it deals with bringing a distributed network of nodes to consensus, and it also provides a solution to Elixir to select teams and to meet some privacy criteria. So it is sort of like a traditional blockchain, plus it helps Elixir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, David mentioned the four pivotal foundations to the success of the network. Obviously privacy and security sounds like there's a lot of focus, but also speed and scalability. And this is something that other networks are still working on, with Bitcoin and Ethereum both looking to be more scalable than they are right now. Has the Elixir team been able to focus on those areas as well?
Yeah, well, I think, the whole thing is not going to happen without, the ability to meet the needs of consumers, like real people. And that means speed, defined as sort of latency, which is I pick up my smartphone, I do what I need to do, and I get closure, say a settlement of a payment or sending of a message in seconds. Because if I don't do that, it doesn't work. It's going to be a niche thing. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, I spent the first, I don't know how many minutes preaching to you about privacy and so on, but it's all for naught if the thing doesn't work from a, high speed functional way. So what happened was David and I have worked together for a while, and I remember him saying, this stuff does not work. I know, I invented it. And what he meant was the crypto involves really large numbers. And when you start adding in computers, which you need to do to get a decentralized distributed network that will support a consensus protocol, you're going to have real problems. I mean, this stuff is just going to be really slow. So he had this breakthrough, which we call pre-computation. And so for the privacy layer, what we do is we set up the decryption and the encryption prior to a user actually needing that framework. So basically, we have teams that have set up a framework, and then you on your smartphone, you just you use your app to address the XX network, and it's all set up for you. That's why we can do it quickly. Otherwise, we'd be in trouble. And the pre-computation, saves, it's orders of magnitude. It's 1,000 times faster. And then so once we had that set up, when we developed the Praxxis protocol with the team in Cayman, we went to some probabilistic security structures, and also found that we could have some group signatures. And there are webinars that explain this in detail, which people could access, from our site, either from Praxxis.io, Elixxir.io, and also we're in the middle of a coin offering. So there's a coin site, which is xx-coin.io, and also it's on YouTube. But basically what we figured out was that we didn't have to have bilateral signatures between each node and each node. We could have a group signature and achieve the same security outcome. And so we, in the same way that we managed to address the issue of speeding up computation in Elixir with pre-computation, on the Praxxis side, we had a breakthrough on how to deal with kind of like a fast consensus protocol. Mm-hmm. And we needed to do that, or else we just could not be able to provide a high performance solution, on smartphones. And the truth is, everybody knows this is what we've been struggling with as an industry or as a movement. People usually call it scalability. So we think we've done it, and we sort of like challenge people to ask us questions, look at our materials. Our biggest challenge is to get people to, so sort of like what we want to say is, we've done it, check to see if it's real. Mm-hmm. And so that's our big challenge right now, is to engage people and to get them to really look at what we've done.
Yeah. That's great. Well, you have the public alpha network right now. What's the development timeline roughly looking like for a beta network and then the full mainnet?
So we started, the alpha network is, by definition, it's third-party node operators, and they operate, on 5 continents. But they are under our control, which is to say, the protocols, the part of the protocol which is decentralized hasn't been implemented yet. So that said, everything is sort of like on the runway, because we went through a process starting in, I think it started actually in January of 2019, of a public process for selecting beta node operators. And we, went through a public review of criteria and such. And the end game is we have 600 beta node operators who are on deck. And so what we're doing right now is getting them organized so that we can deploy the first instance of the consensus protocol. And we believe we'll be able to do that deployment, that is to say the beta implementation of the XX network, in the first half of 2020. So like months from now. And
Great.
Right now we have, one of the things we did, which I think is distinctive, is that we released an app, which we call the XX Collective app. and that's an app that people can download on Android and Apple on iOS to kind of track what we're doing. And one of the things on there is a real-time dashboard for the performance of the AlphaNet of the XX network, so you can see the thing operating in real time on third-party nodes. And so, we're trying to make it transparent. Like, look, the thing is working, and we'll do that with the beta node implementation as well.
That's great, Jim. You mentioned that there is a coin sale going on right now. I'm also curious if you're looking for more developers or other team members, and how can they all find out more information?
Thanks so much for asking about that. Yeah, we're in the middle of what, I don't know. So we have 6,000 members or of our collective, the XX collective, and we've been interacting with people on an email platform as well. And so basically what we wanted to do is to give people the opportunity to, interact and get involved early. We'd spent, a year and a half, 2 years. We really have flown all over the world trying to meet people and share with people what we're doing. And so the first step, we did something we call it, an initial public sale. It's kind of like an IEO. And what we wanted to do was to get a broad base of people. And so far we've had, I think, over 400 coin investors in over 50 countries. And we're trying to get them in early before we have, the run up to mainnet. And I think it's really important and distinctive. We've had no venture capital, sort of like Silicon Valley institutional investment. We've kind of, made a go of it to kind of go to the people, and that's what we're doing right now. And we've been at it for a couple of weeks, and we have another phase coming in this next week. But it's the XX coin, and the information is at xx-coin.io. The only twist, which is kind of unfortunate, is because of the instability and immaturity of U.S. law, we really can't take money or purchasing from U.S. so-called U.S. persons. So that's a bit of an unfortunate thing that we're not that happy about, and we're hoping we'll be able to remedy that in the next couple of months as the laws evolve.
Mm-hmm. That's great, Jim. Well, all the best with the XX network. It sounds like you're well on the way, and I will leave those links for the developers to follow for the release of the beta network down in the description box below, as well as the XX coin sale as well. And that's all the time that we have for the interview, but I appreciate you coming on and taking the time, and let's follow up in the near future.
Thanks so much, Ashton. Really appreciate the time.